Today with us is Sьюзан Макконел, who is a senior lead trainer in IFS Institute. And Sьюзан also has her own branch of IFS that she has developed that is called Somatic IFS. And there is a book that was recently published, authored by Sьюзан, that we will also talk about today. But the major purpose of this interview is for you to get to know Sьюзан and, to get to know a little bit about her as a person and as a professional. So welcome, Sьюзан. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Irina. It's so good to see you again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I so appreciate you, agreeing to answer some questions for the Russian audience.
Mhm.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about IFS in terms of how it affected you, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, sure. Well, I have to go back to the 90s, 1990s,
Yes.
when I was teaching a form of psychotherapy called Hakomi,
Uh-huh.
and it's Hakomi, which is a body-centered psychotherapy that uses mindfulness to help clients go deep into their own inner systems. So it's very close to IFS in a way, although Hakomi didn't have a particular concept about parts and self. Like they didn't, Dick really has helped us go inside and identify the aspects of our inner world in terms of, categories of parts. And I wasn't really looking for a training, but I was looking for a consultation group. And I
Yeah.
found out that Dick Schwartz was offering a consultation group
Mhm.
in the Chicago area. So I was living in Chicago, and I was told too that it would be sort of a 2-for-1 thing. I would get consultation, but I would also become familiar with another type of therapy that was very compatible with
Mhm.
the one that I was using. So like I said, my primary need was for consultation, but I found as I after about a year or so in the consult group, and I saw him doing demos and stuff with each of us, that it was very useful to get consultation, not in terms of, well, why don't you try this with that client, but more like, go inside right now, Sьюzan, and see what parts of you come up with this relationship. So of course it became a way for me to look not only at the parts of me that came up in therapy,
Mhm.
but to get very curious about my parts,
Mhm.
um, or at least to do an inner look at my life in terms of an IFS perspective.
Mhm.
Um, so it really began to transform not only my psychotherapy practice, but also all of my personal life as well.
Mhm.
Mm.
I definitely can resonate with that because I feel like IFS had very similar impact on me. I came to IFS to just learn, another approach to therapy and how to work with individuals who are traumatized, and I
Mhm.
came out with like a new philosophy of life and the new, whole new perspective on the world and people and everything. So
Right, right.
yeah, I got much more than I asked for.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And
And
there was a time, because it was right at the beginning. It was back in 1997 that I started teaching, and that was before anything was organized in terms of assistant trainers and et cetera, et cetera. And there was no policies, no procedures. It was just me going along with Dick and typing up his lectures and adding some of my own ideas about how to make it more experiential, because I
Mhm,
was a Hakomi teacher, and Hakomi is very experiential.
mhm,
And Dick didn't even have any handouts back then. So I was coming up with some visual
mhm.
handouts for the students, and I was kind of like Dick's substitute at first. He'd be like, "Oh, I double booked," or, "Oh, I'm sick, I can't make it." And I'd be like, "Oh, okay, I can teach." But then after a while, it became clear to me that that IFS was beginning to spread, was really taking on, not just in Chicago, but in East Coast, the West Coast, and even in Europe. And so I was really at a good place where I could take over some of these trainings that were too much for Dick. And then
Mhm,
it became clear to me too that Dick wasn't going to be able to be the main head teacher with us being his substitute or his assistants or whatever, but that many of us would be called upon to actually be the head teacher. So I began to develop the very first curriculum in teaching IFS. And I think I did that around 1997, 98 maybe. And different versions of that became our main manual, our main trainer manual up until very recently, with some, some alterations. But that, I think maybe in a way I had a vision of IFS growing and growing to many different countries, really all over the world, and that we needed to find a way to foster leadership and across the states, in the United States, but also across the different countries in the world.
Wow.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So what is it like for you then? Like to see, what is it like maybe 20 years later, a little bit, over 20 years later, to see that IFS reached pretty much every corner of the world, and how much interest there is, that there is, like people on the waiting list, and like
Oh,
it's really buzz,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I never would have envisioned that. I remember in an early training in Chicago, and Dick was just talking to me. I was part of these little groups where Dick would say, "Oh, I'm thinking about this," or "I'm thinking about that," and we'd give him feedback. But I remember one time, this was before, it was just Dick, nobody but Dick, and I said, Dick, you need a strategic planner. I really didn't know much about organizational development, but I said, you really need some help other than me. I mean, I don't know about this stuff. You really need like somebody to help you think about maybe 5 years down the road. And at that point, even 5 years seemed a really long time, but I thought, you needed to have a long-term vision. But you ask, 20 some years, and seeing the explosion of IFS all over the world, it's really quite a surprise and a delight. It's so wonderful to see how this model is changing not just the face of psychotherapy, but it's being applied way beyond and much broader than psychotherapy. So it's wonderful, because I do believe, in addition to this wonderful expansion of IFS, the problems and the issues in the world that need to be addressed through something like this wonderful model have also expanded. So the demand is being met by the model.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can definitely see that,
Yeah.
how it's so useful in so many different areas of life, pretty much anywhere where people interact with each other and, have to work together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, you kind of started talking about it already, and I just wanted to ask you, like you have been training for a very long time, right? And so I'm wondering, like what keeps you going? Like what keeps you coming back and training more people and continuing with this?
Yeah. But that's such a good question, because um, when I think about the very first conference I went to, Dick was kind of, well, we've got this conference, is, kind of maybe be, I don't know, 100 people there. You might want to come. And I thought, well, okay. So I went and I started to meet people. Actually, the very first conference I went to, I presented at. In fact, my presentation was about bringing the body into IFS.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I met so many wonderful people. And I said to Dick later, I said, I really like the model, but I have to say that I really like the community. I really like the people that are drawn to this model. And it's like a whole possibility opened up of, in addition, of course, to my Hakomi community, to have this wonderful IFS community of like-minded people. And that has been a wonderful resource, just the community, of course, of other trainers. And the communities that form within every training, both the getting to work with an assistant trainer and with the program assistants, but also feeling part of it. Maybe it's a temporary family in a way, in terms of the amount of time we spend together for a period of time, and then it all kind of dissipates and goes off into the universe, and then another training starts. but in a way, even though we don't meet, there's still a sense of being part of this wider community of like-minded people, that although we all have our differences, we have certain things that we share. So that really sustains me, that sense of being supported or being part of a vast network. But also, you know, there's something about, I never get tired of teaching a level 1.
Yeah.
I just, even though you might think I would, and I sometimes have asked myself why I don't, but there's something just fresh and new each time. And seeing the participants' excitement, watching their process of discovering their own inner worlds and healing their own inner worlds, and then being excited about being able to take it out into the world with their clients and beyond. I think there's just something very sustaining about this healing process that I guess I just realized I feel very committed to healing and to teaching. You know, that is clearly why I am here on this planet, is to facilitate healing, whether it's in my own practice or in a training group, and also to teach other people to be able to spread the healing. You know, and certainly my own healing. IFS has really helped me personally heal, absolutely. And so then to take that healing and then want to spread it beyond myself to wider and wider circles of influence it just never gets tired, and never gets tiring, and never gets boring, and never gets, oh, I've been there, done that, I can move on. The only thing that I can say that one, the pandemic definitely put the brakes on for me. That was really the only thing that caused me to stop and just pause. Now, it was, for me, it was a matter of some personal grief. My mother died early on. She died in March. And that was right around the same time that we were being asked as a community of IFS trainers to jump into Zoom. And I just couldn't imagine how I was going to do that. I think my whole system, my body and my mind, my internal system just needed to stop everything and let myself grieve. It wasn't that it was not an unexpected loss. My mother at 96 I knew she wouldn't last forever, you know, and it was definitely her time, you know, her body just was saying it's time to go. But it still is my mother, you know, and that's pretty significant relationship. And at the same time, with the pandemic and the fear of dying and death increasing every month, more and more people dying here, you know, everywhere, all over the planet, that it was just clear, not that it was a conscious decision, but it was just clear that I needed to take, you know, basically about 6 months to just feel the shock and the grief, to almost be maybe one of the main IFS trainers who was not able to just roll up her sleeves and jump right into Zoom, but to kind of hold that pole of shock and grief and let it move through my body and just be present to that. And in a way, hold it not just for my internal system, but maybe for the wider web that I was speaking of. And I just maybe needed to do that. And of course, I had different parts come up, Irina. You know, I can imagine I had parts that felt like I was letting down the community. There were so many people wanting to be taught. There were parts that were afraid I would be left behind. There were parts that thought I should be able to just be like the other trainers and just, you know, just get on board with the task at hand. But I had to really respect what my inner system was doing, in spite of what my parts were thinking I should be doing. And in particular, I mean, and this may lead to, I think, another thing you wanted to ask me about, but it led to in September, I was anticipating the release of a book that I had been working on for about 2 or 3 years prior to this. So Should I just move right in, or
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
please tell us
okay,
about the book. And yes,
okay, yeah.
yes.
Well, clearly, as I said, even from the beginning, as a Hakomi trainer that was, or Hakomi teacher that was working with the intersection of mind and body, and a realization that it just opens up into the spiritual realm, which of course IFS covers beautifully with the concept of self-energy. You know, it really makes it a very psycho-spiritual model. And I was wanting to make sure that it was a somato psycho-spiritual
Okay.
model, right?
Uh-huh.
And yet during those years of being a trainer, it was important to me to keep the body a little bit on the side and just really adhere as formally as I could to teaching the model as Dick wanted us trainers to teach it. I wanted to be true to the model as I understood it. And of course, I also learned I couldn't be Dick Schwartz. I had to be Suzan
Right.
McConnell and
Of
let the
course.
model come through my body and my inner system, and be true to that as well. And
Mhm.
yet, in time, I was hearing from people that were saying, you know, I've learned it from Dick, and now I'm learning it from you. And there's something about the way when I watch you do demos, or I listen to your teaching, there's something a little different, and I'm curious, and I'd like to know more about what it is you do. So I began over time to bring the body in a little bit more, to offer it as workshops, and then eventually to offer it as a week-long retreat, which you got to
Yes.
participate in that
Costa
in
Rica.
Costa
Yes.
Rica.
Yes.
And but still, I was having my main involvement in IFS be teaching IFS level 1 and 2, and just this thing on the side, you know. But then, particularly as I decided to write the book, the somatic internal family systems therapy became more and more um, a part of who I was, or not even a part in the way we use the word part, but it became who I was and what I wanted to offer as a teacher.
Mhm.
And what became clear to me as I started to thaw out from this shock and grief with the pandemic, and it was receiving so many requests
Mhm.
to offer somatic IFS, not just in book form,
Mhm.
but really more, not in person, of course, not wasn't possible,
Mhm.
but through online, you know. And I first I thought, I don't know if I can really deliver, you know, adequately such an embodied uh, part of the teaching. It just seemed like I knew I could do it in person.
Right.
I knew that it required us being intimately connected with each other somatically, you know, all the information that we can get through our bodies. As we listen to our bodies, we listen to our breath, and we watch our clients and their gestures, and their posture and their movements. And as we access self energy through our own vertical connection to above and below, and open to the space around us, and feel the spaciousness within us, and we maybe even let our sensations that we become aware of, we let them move through our body. And when we realize that the verbal story is
Mhm.
just really half of the story, and so much more is being told, maybe so much more of the story is being told that can't be told through words alone, or maybe can't be told at all through words, that I just wondered, can we really do this in this two-dimensional reality, you know? Or do I just need to wait until such a day when we can really meet again in person? And I was getting a lot of encouragement to offer, to see if I could, you know, what are the possibilities of Zoom? And one obvious one is, right now you and I are reaching many people. It just depends on their, you know, tuning into YouTube and listening whenever it's convenient for them.
Right.
So with some of the Zoom offerings, some of the online offerings, I'm realizing we can have a whole transatlantic connection. You know, people who speak English in the U.S. and people who speak English in Europe
Right.
can, and even in Asia. You know, I've been,
Uh-huh.
you know, working with people in Australia and Korea and other places in Asia, and you know, so that's an obvious advantage of online learning, communicating. And I'm finding, and people had been telling me, they said it's really not all that two-dimensional. If you just really focus you know, like it's just you and me, Irina, right now, and other listeners too. You know, I can feel some warmth in my heart, and I can feel a connection with you and through you to all the people that may be tuning in, you know, at different points, you know. So it's really quite magical in a way, you know, that this pandemic has offered us many restrictions that we grieve, right? And we maybe even rail against, oh, I'm tired of this, and I'm tired of the mask, and I can't see you, and I can't touch you, and but at the same time, there's been some gifts of both, you know, in our own personal lives of more rest, more time to reflect, and you know, be with just a very intimate group of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people. So yeah, I've been realizing that I can offer some things through online learning for Somatic IFS. I realized that there's nobody else that can do it. It's just, at this point, it's just me. And I want to expand the pool of people who can also offer Somatic IFS. And right now there's a wonderful pool of people who can teach IFS, many of whom I have trained and have mentored. And so in a way, even though they need more trainers to teach IFS, I need to like leave that for now anyway, and just offer Somatic IFS myself, because I'm the only one that can do it right now.
Yeah, that is excellent. You know, I'm so glad that Somatic IFS is, you know, taking on, so to speak, and then taking off, you know, and that the book came out, which is amazing. And so you are doing online program, right, in Somatic IFS now?
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, and I'm wondering, like, looking into the future, you know, is there a plan to like do level 2 in somatics, you know, like IFS level 2 or something else, you know, like what do you envision kind of looking forward with Somatic IFS?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it took me a while to, you know, there were parts of me that just wanted to respond. Oh, I want this. Okay, I could give you that. And I want that. Oh, I could give you that. But in time, it became clear that I would be way too scattered, and I needed to just focus on what is it, like, what is my plan? You know, how is it that I want to convey this? And, you know, I went back to what is it that I've been offering through the Costa Rica retreat? And I thought that I've made it very clear to people who attend Costa Rica that this is not a training, that the first step, which is what I've learned very much from both Hakomi and all the other things I've studied, as well as from Dick with IFS, is that we need to start with ourselves. And so that's a week-long immersion in person into the 5 practices of Somatic IFS, which start with awareness of the body, which obviously then leads to breathing, awareness that we're breathing. We're breathing all the time, and every now and then we notice it, you know, and that opens up a whole world of both, you know, with every step of the model, with all of these practices. There's 5 practices, and all of them can be used with every single step of the IFS model, from finding a part, witnessing it, unburdening it, and then integrating it into your lives, integrating the transformation into your life. So awareness, and then breathing, and then that leads to resonance, which is really, we move into the relational piece. So there's a way that we, with our limbic brains and our hearts and even our gut, we really, we can connect both with our own system and also with another system. So it's a way of listening that isn't just like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, but like, oh, like letting ourselves be impacted, you know, like a pebble dropped into water, letting it ripple through our fluid bodies. And then, so that's awareness, breathing, resonance, and then movement. And the ripples even suggest movements. It's like, you know, so letting ourselves take how emotion is moving through us and realizing that it really is moving through us and it wants to move. And then finally, touch, attuned touch, not just touch maybe coming from a part that could have more harm than healing, but coming from embodied self, because with all of these practices lead to self really being fully embodied. And so touch from embodied self can be ethical and it can be very healing. And many therapists shy away from touch, which we understand why that is done. But we find that touch, when coming from embodied self, can be very, very healing. So those are the 5 practices: awareness, breath, resonance, movement, and touch, with all of the practices of IFS. And going off into that, now I forget what I was going to say. I was talking about the trainings. That's what you asked me. So an immersion into these practices within your own body, you know, so that you get it in every cell. And then we begin to be curious about how can I bring this into my clinical practice? Wow, this could be useful for all the clinical issues, from, you know, attachment wounds to trauma to, you know, eating disorders, of course, and addictions and relational issues and parenting and of course chronic illness, you know, the parts that come up around our physical difficulties. So there is not a single clinical issue that using these 5 practices in conjunction with the IFS model, it can't just potentiate our healing, our clients' healing, and potentiate a therapeutic relationship. So I've been doing many, like for 15 years or so, I've been doing these Costa Rica retreats, week long, you know, about 30 some hours of immersion. And many of my participants have been saying, this is automatically in a very natural, organic way influencing my work with my clients, but I could really use a little bit more guidance. Could you devise a training in that? So
I know, Susan, I remember that I was one of those people
you
too.
were, yeah. And you know, for years actually, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, one of these days. So first I wrote the book, you know, and then I even thought, you know, maybe that's enough. And maybe that's all that's needed. But it was pretty clear from the responses I got, people saying, I've read your book, you know, 3 times and I really want a training.
Right.
And I'd be like, okay. So then out of that, I devised a training, which is about the length of a level 2. And it's for people who have both done at least a level 1 and for people who have also done some version of an immersion into the experiences. So I'm doing a training right now for people who have been either to a retreat I've done in Costa Rica or a retreat I've done in Europe. And we're in the middle of that right now. And I'm offering some online versions of what we do in Costa Rica, or, you know, the retreat section, which involves both, well, it basically, you know, also, I don't know how people do these 6 days in a row of 6-8 hour days. It just seems like, you know, people are finding that difficult. So I'm trying to do just 3-hour blocks, because I just have so much compassion for all the therapists who are spending 30 hours a week just staring at their screen, trying to help their clients, you know, and then they just, like someone said, it's like all give and no get, you know. It's not exactly true, but there's less of this, you know, let me do it this direction, you know, like a really a sustaining relationship is you give and then you see that made a difference and you take that in and then it gives you more, and then, you know, so there's just this lovely wave. And when it's this, like there's some of that, you know, but it isn't quite the same amount comes back.
And it takes more work also on the part of therapists to just be present, and, you know.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. It's just somehow it's more draining, is what I've heard from my colleagues. So I don't want to contribute to the draining, and that I want to contribute to the teaching. So I've compromised with 3-hour time blocks. So which means I can't offer as many trainings because it takes, you know, it's over a longer period of time. But I'm offering some, I call them IFS, Somatic IFS practices series. So it's usually a series of 6 3-hour offerings. And then after that, with a level 1, they're eligible to take a training. But I need to get those scheduled for myself, because right now I just have some series available, but I need to do some more series and then do a training, probably not until, I'm hoping maybe about less than a year from now, I can offer another training, which is, it's not actually a level 2 organized by IFSI. So it's more independent because I'm offering it independently, but it can, I just said it's similar to like if you think of it as like a level 2, that's what it is.
Right. So it's similar in terms of like the intensity and format, and that it builds on level 1.
Yes.
Plus
And it's 54 hours, and it involves supervised practice groups, and it involves seeing me do a demo, and people reading the chapters of the book, and we discussing the book, and so it's quite intensive.
That's great. And the next one that like you're thinking about, like, are you thinking about the possibility of in-person, training next time?
Yes, in person. Maybe it will be possible to do this in person a year from now.
Yes.
Like, I am hopeful. In fact, I'm hopeful that if you look at my website, you'll see that I have both online offerings as well as in person. And I'm hoping to do a retreat in Hawaii in December, and then I'm also hoping to do another in person, the usual that I do in Costa Rica in January. And then maybe, I mean, if it is truly safe, again, like the advantage of in-person trainings, but then on the other hand, I could reach anyone all over the world if I do online. So I might do some combination of in-person, where you just go somewhere for, maybe 2 different weeks, 2 different intensive trainings over a period of 2 different weeks. At a really lovely site, and then also offer Zoom trainings online to people who, who are spread out all over the world.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it, because I really want to take a training with you in person, on Somatic IFS. And really looking forward.
Let's keep in touch with that. Again, maybe a year from now it will be, of course, I would have to, that's the trouble though with planning something, like you have to kind of know at least 6 months in advance. And I'm really my parts are getting accustomed to living with uncertainty and planning what we can plan, and just being open to things changing. We can hope, and then what do they say? Prepare for the worst and hope for the best, something like that.
Right. Well, Suzan, so we talked about, your journey in IFS. We talked about training and why you do that. We talked about Somatic IFS, which is your specialty, and about the book that you wrote. Is there anything else, before we stop for today, that you would like to share? Maybe also like with the Russian audience, or just with the audience?
Oh, yes. I would like to, I was going to say, no, I feel really complete. And I wanted to just speak about how wonderful it is to just have you ask questions that allow me to share about something so dear to my heart. This is just, as you can tell, I have a lot of passion about it. But I'm also very excited about offering this series to the people in Russia, the Russian-speaking people. There will be a translator, and instead of 3 hours, it will be 4 to allow for the extra time taken for the translation. And it's being organized by the people in Moscow that have organized IFS Level 1s. And it will be open both to graduates of the IFS Level 1, as well as people who have been accepted to take the next IFS Level 1. And I believe we start that in June of this year. And I think that the people who are going to be taking the next IFS Level 1, I believe their Level 1 begins in August. So some of those people will be taking a training in Somatic IFS. I'm sorry, it's not a training, it's a series. So they will all be getting, which is essentially, like I said, an experiential immersion. And we will take a different 4-hour time block to look at first one, awareness of the body, the sensations that we find in the body. And then the second one, just bringing conscious awareness to our breathing, and on and on, so the 6 sessions, 4 hours each, to go through each of the practices, and since there's 5 practices and there's 6 sessions, the last one is on embodied self.
How wonderful. That is lovely. Yeah, I'm so glad that you will be offering this, to Russian audience. And, again, that online format makes it kind of easy in this respect. There are some difficulties, but it's also easier in some ways. You don't have to travel.
Well,
Yeah.
Irina, I have to say that sitting with you in Costa Rica and you talking about your deep desire to bring IFS to the Russian people really ignited in me a little flame, which now is getting a chance to, grow into something hopefully very warm and enlightening, So,
Yeah.
so I want to thank you for that. Was many, many years ago. I don't even know what year it was. Do you remember?
I think it was 2017, maybe.
Okay, well, not that long ago, but
Long
4
ago.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were, I think, probably the first person that I met that excited me about teaching this in Russian to the Russian people.
Yeah.
So I look forward to understanding more about. Of course, I had been looking forward to being there in person, but
Right.
that won't happen, at least not this year. But I just look forward to getting to know people who I wouldn't get to know if it weren't for a translator. I just so love that there is translation available, that those people who mostly speak Russian can hear it in their own mother tongue, and I can have the words of their hearts and minds and bodies translated back to me. So I get to know people who otherwise I wouldn't get to know. So
Yeah. All right. Well, Susan, thank you so much for doing this interview. I really, really, really appreciate your time and your presence and, your wisdom. And I know that like a Russian audience would absolutely love listening to you because your passion is very, very obvious. So, yeah.
well,
Thank you
getting to
so much.
share it really just helps it grow too. So I
That's
appreciate you and that your
Yeah.
and your mission to spread this, to the
Yeah.
Russian speaking people. I bow to you, Irina.
And me to you. There we go.
And a big hug.
That's right. That's right. So let me
Okay.
pause the recording here. So I'm going to stop that.